One thing we can be pretty sure of is that the part where the king lived probably wasn't down here on this floor. This would have been the constable's part. The king would have lived on the floor above. And you can see why we should think that if we go up this spiral staircase, because these stairs lead to a very special room. This is the royal chapel. It's where the king and his family used to say their prayers. And just look at it. No rough stone here, because all the walls and these pillars are covered in smooth limestone, which the king would have had brought over all the way from Normandy. Now, in Norman times, the chapel here wouldn't have looked as bare as this, because the walls and the ceiling would have been painted with colourful patterns. That's something we know from looking at old paintings of other Norman buildings. Now, in most Norman churches and chapels, the wall behind the altar here was semicircular, and that's how the king had it built here. And that's why this corner of the tower is rounded. You remember we saw that from the outside. And if you look up at the top of the arches, you'll see that they're rounded as well. And that's another clue that tells us that this was a Norman building. So, because this is the royal chapel, we can be pretty sure that his rooms would have been on this level too, and not down below. So let's look through this door and see if we can find any other traces of where he used to live.
Well, nowadays, this room looks like a museum, doesn't it? But back in Norman times, this was the king's great hall. And, of course, it would have looked very, very different from this then. Now, one interesting thing we've discovered is to do with that wooden ceiling up there. Now, apparently, that was put in long after the White Tower was built. So, this means that back in Norman times, this room used to go up and up, right up to the roof, just like the chapel. And it would have had a gallery all the way round the sides there, and that gallery would have gone through and joined up with the gallery in the chapel. Now, also, somewhere in here, there must have been a throne, probably down one end. And that's where the king would have sat to receive all his guests, and there would have been a great big table on which they would have had huge feasts. So try and imagine all that. This room was the most important room in the whole of the kingdom.